All right, let's go ahead and get started. So as people are joining in and those that are here, there is a question and answer panel that you can put in your questions and as you go through, but I will also save a little bit of time toward the end to go over those as well. Again, thanks for joining and let's get started here. So one of the things is updating shared parameters is how long it takes to do so. You get the speed of Revit itself of just going in there and managing your shared parameter file, but then also managing the families with those and projects. So it can be pretty difficult to go through those and make sure you have your shared parameter file updated, your content is using the correct parameters. So this webinar, I'm going to be covering how we can go about updating those quickly by using the CTC software suites of the BIM Manager Suite and the BIM Project Suite. The first thing is to understand shared parameter files. So working with this can be pretty difficult in Revit of going into the dialog box and editing the shared parameters and moving them from one group to another or changing them. It can be pretty difficult. And the biggest thing to understand about shared parameters is that Revit goes off of the GUID of the shared parameter, not the name of the shared parameter. So if you look here on this screenshot, you can see there's a GUID number here. When you open up a shared parameter file, you have the parameter, then the GUID, then the name and the database type, the data category, the group, is it visible, the description, and all that. And then that GUID is what's very important to Revit. Again, not the name, it's the GUID. And what Revit will do is if that GUID is different, then it will have think it's a different parameter. It could have the exact same name, but a completely different GUID. This will cause an issue that Revit will say, hey, you're a different parameter, you're not the same. So when you try to update it or you do something else, it won't let you because it's a different GUID. So with the tools that we're going to be covering, can help identify some issues that you might have in your shared parameters and then also in your families themselves. So that's what we're going to cover here. The first tool that we'll get into is the Shared Parameter Manager. This tool is designed exactly for what we need in the regards of managing the shared parameter file itself. You can create a shared parameter file. You can manage shared parameters from one to another file. You could also create new ones, new parameters, new groups, much better than you can in Revit itself. So let's get into Revit and we will then show how Revit itself is doing it. So on the Manage tab, Shared Parameters, in here I'm going to browse to a shared parameter file that we can then use with the tools as well. And with this, I'm going to grab this master one here and open it. And here I can see all my groups and the parameters within those groups. If I want to create a new parameter, I can click New and give it a parameter name and a discipline, electrical or energy, HVAC, infrastructure, structural or common. And then common, you get all these other parameters as, is it a distance or whatever else. So let's make one that's text. And so now I got my shared parameter in there. Now, if I look at the properties of it, when I click it, I get the common, the text, and all that. But notice I can't also not do anything with it. You can't come in here and just simply edit it. There is no edit button. So once a shared parameter is made, it's stuck. You can't delete it, or you can delete it, but you can't modify it to change its type. So if you wanted to do that, you have to delete it and then create a new one. So that's a limitation here within this that, in order to do that, I have to delete, yes, and then say new, and then give it a new name in here. Now this one I'm going to say length for just for now again, because maybe I want it to be a length instead of text. So in Revit itself, naturally going through the shared parameter manager feature of it, it's just going in here and editing it. Takes a little bit of time, and especially finding those where those groups are. So if I'm looking for a particular parameter, I have to kind of go through here and scan each one of the groups to see if, hey, is that parameter in there or is it not? So I have to keep going through there. But with the shared parameter manager, it's much easier. So on the CTC Software tab, there is the shared parameter manager for the BIM Manager Suite. So within this tool, you have the Manage Shared Parameter Files tab, where you can select your shared parameters that you're looking for. And then you'll see a list of all the groups, and then expand it to see all the parameters within that group. So right now, I can already see all the groups at once instead of each group individually, where I have to, in Revit, to drop down and select that individual group. So right there, I'm already being able to go faster because now I can see everything at once instead of each one. So I can expand these and find what I'm looking for. But also up here is a search functionality where I can drop this down and say by parameter name or parameter type. And then I can start searching. And then the list is going to get filtered to match the criteria of what I looked for. So I searched angle, and I see door swing angle, and then control angle leaf 1. So I can filter pretty quickly to know what group it's in and what the parameter name is. So it's pretty fast right there just to search it, find it, and I'm good to go. And also here, when I did clear it, it does have expanded, but there are these two buttons here where you can expand and collapse all trees. So pretty nice to just be able to quickly expand everything or quickly collapse everything. And then on the middle column, we have the parameters where you can add a parameter. And the benefit of this add versus Revit's is I can add multiple parameters at the same time instead of having to click new, type it in, click it, all that. So let's say I wanted to create multiple text parameters here with different names. So again, I could just come in here quickly, add multiple in here, and then just say create. And it created my shared parameters for me pretty quickly. They're all the same type of parameter. They're all that. So I just made an adjustment. They're there. There is the ability also to delete the parameters. You can move from one group to another. So I just hit move, it moved it down, but I could also drag it. So the speed of just dragging, but also manually selecting and moving. And then even in here, if I wanted to create a new group, and let's say I want to create one called exports or something else. So now I created a group called export. Now I'm going to grab these IFC ones here and just move it to export. Let's grab these test ones. Let's also move that down to testing. So again, the speed of just being able to modify this really quick is just amazing. And then groups, if I want to create other ones here, like add default groups. So you can add, all the phasings, all the ones that are come out of the box here. So if you don't use all of them, and of course you can just delete all those, but it's just the ability to say default. So like it looks like all the Revits here, you can do that. Renaming groups, deleting the groups. And also a favorites is the prefix and suffix of shared parameters. So I can come in here and say prefix. And then I could say something like ATG underscore. Now here it says to all share parameters. So if I do that, it is going to say it's going to rename, do all the GUIDs there. So do you want to continue? I'm going to say no, but you can run through that and it will go through and do all that. Now, one of the things here that is also available is the modify of a shared parameter. So if I click modify, and I can come in here and rename it, change the group, change its type, and so on. However, just to clarify on this particular portion as well, is if I come in here and let's say I want to add in something at the end here, and I say, okay, it is going to say, hey, I'm changing the GUID. Do you want to continue? So if this particular parameter is in a family, and I have now come in here and changed the parameter to something else, then it is going to be changing that GUID. So now I got to go update my families with the new parameter. So I will do that here in a little bit, going over one of the other tools. I'm going to rename that with underscore ATG so it matches similar to my other one. I just saw a question pop up of, can multiple users edit the shared parameter file at the same time through shared parameter tool, or will it create an error for the second user trying to manage the shared parameter file? That's actually a good question. If you can put in your information on the chat, I could definitely reach out to you afterward. I don't have a second user to test with right now, but I could definitely look into that one. I think what you can browse to it and select it and start to modify it, but only one user will be able to save it at a time. If another user tries to save, they may get that it's in use. I cannot recall if the tool locks the file that it's in use by another software, but I could definitely test and see if I can let you know. Oh, thanks for your contact information. I will definitely get back to you on that one. So very good question. Okay. One of the other ones that find and replace is the ability to find something and replace it with something. So if I'm coming through here and renaming my shared parameters, I want to put in some character in there. So I can go in there and say, find this, replace it with this. It's a really fast, nice feature for that. Okay, and then the other benefit of this tool is the ability to look at multiple files to do comparison between them. So a source share parameter, I'm going to browse to another file, and then I can do some comparison between the two files. And the way I could do that is up here, there is the ability to do a filter where I can say, okay, show me the conflicts. So when I pick conflicts, then it's going to highlight the parameter on both sides if there is an issue with it. Right here, I'm going to say show only so that I only see those. So right here, I have this appearance schedule, appearance schedule. When I hover over it, it actually tells me that the parameter conflicts with the other one because the GUID is a different GUID. Same name, different GUID. So that's an issue. So now it's basically up to me. I'm going to pick this one versus this one. Then I can come in here and say unique. So here's all my parameters that are in my file that do not exist in this one. Here's all the parameters over here that do not exist in this one. Now, if I want, I can then grab all of these and move them over to my file. So now I grabbed them, I grabbed the group itself and moved it over to my file, and notice that there's nothing in this group because now they are no longer unique. They are now duplicate. So when I say duplicate, here's those parameters within the clearance. Here's the parameters within the clearance. So these parameters are exactly the same. They're the same GUID, the same name and everything. So I pulled that entire group over into my shared parameter file pretty quickly. And then naming issues. The only thing with this one, naming issues, is when you hover over it, you will say here, the parameter contains an illegal character. Basically, the illegal character is the dash sign there. This one here is the parameter name is not title cased. That one is not really a conflict or a naming issue. That is based on the standards that was made quite a while ago of here's how you should name your shared parameters and so on. Do not contain special characters like the dash or the slash. Like this one over here, there's a slash in there. Because if you try to put that in a formula, Revit will think that is a minus sign or a divide sign. So you'd have to do something else to be able to get around that issue there. So naming issues, it can be, some things can be, considered fine. Your underscores, I think those are fine. But the slashes, the dash, the case sensitive, not a big deal. But and currently there is no way to customize the settings for that to say, okay, the case sensitive is fine. There is options for the tool, but it's basically coming in here and remembering the position, warn them, but is nothing of customizing the naming issues at this time. So again, the speed of this is just amazing, just to quickly go through and grab these parameters from one to another, do the comparison much faster than within Revit itself. I can't do that. I'd have to use some other program or edit this text files and manually copy paste. Now with that, when I go back to the options, I do want to show that there is right here, backup master shared parameter file before overwriting, and then how many master backups do you want? Right now I have one. And what that means is that right here, I added the clearances to the shared parameter file. So if I hit save, it is going to override the shared parameter file with the changes that I've made, but it will then create a backup in that same folder that it had. So for example, I'm going to move this over here. So there's my master shared parameter file. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to say save. It was saved successfully. Now, if I go back and look into the folder here, there's my backup. And it puts that little 2 in there so that I know that that's a backup. So if for some reason, if I did make a mistake in editing the shared parameter file, I have a backup that I can jump to. So I highly recommend, keeping backups. Now, the next portion here is the ability to load shared parameters into your project. So right here, I can browse to my shared parameter file. If you already had something specified here in the master shared parameter file, there is this button here of just open master, which all it does is it takes that file and brings it over. Otherwise, you browse out to it manually. Then what I can do is I can select my parameters that I want over here. And I can create a selection set so that I can use this again for other projects. So I'm going to come in here and say equipment clearances. So I created a selection set. Then I'm going to come in here and select those parameters and add it over to it. Then I'm going to select them again and say what they're going to. So let's say these are going to be for mechanical equipment. Maybe they're also going to be for doors. So I got mechanical equipment and doors that I'm applying these categories to. So all these parameters are going to be available for both of those categories. Then I get to choose what group they go to. So let's make them under constraints. And then they're all going to be instant parameters. Can they vary per group, or are they aligned to the group type? And once I have all those selected, I can simply say load parameters, and this will load all those parameters into the open project that I'm in. Actually, no, before I do that, let's actually go back to the project here. And I'm going to show you those parameters that I don't have in there. So I'm going to select the door here and look in the properties under the constraints. You'll see that those parameters do not exist for that door. I'm going to go back here and let's load those in. Now, this actually brings up another point here that if you notice when I browsed to my master shared parameter file and I opened it, my selection set is already here. I don't have to redo what I did. The reason for that is because when you picked your settings and you created that, it creates a saved settings of that so that you can use this again for other projects that as soon as you pick your shared parameter, the settings file for shared parameter manager gets saved next to that file so that you can repeat this process on other projects. So now I'm just going to say load. And then I get the information that it was loaded. Click my door. There are the constraints. So now those parameters are available. Now these are created as parameters within the project. So if I go to project parameters, they're all listed here. So it didn't add them to the family itself. It added it to the project. So if I edit the family, look at the property or the family in here, those constraints are not there. However, I can come in here and use that as well. Tell it whether it's an insert or type, and I can load the parameters into the family. Oh, I apologize. I was thinking of another one. This is actually, yeah, so here, cannot add to a family. So I have to actually open up and switch over. So let's see, actually, if I come back over here, oops. So it did actually add them, but why did it give me an error? I'll have to look at that one. But yeah, it did add it, but it didn't warn me to. So it depends on if you want to go to the family or to the project. But again, that was only doing one family at a time, so that would take forever. So we'll get into another one here in a little bit. Now, a couple more features here with the shared parameter that will help as well is you do have the ability to export shared parameters from a project or from project and family or to spreadsheet. So you can just simply export to a spreadsheet and then you can use the spreadsheet to determine other things. But let's say I'm going to say from project, and then it tells me here's my settings there. So let's go ahead and save that. And then what that will help me to be able to do is now I can come in here and there's my export. And then I'm going to pick my master on this side. And then what I could do is hit this little switch icon, and it flipped that my master is over here and the one that I exported is over here. And this is where I can then compare these. Are there any conflicts? Are there uniques? So here I got a couple of uniques that are not in my shared parameter. I want to get those in my shared parameter. So I'm going to just pull that whole group over. So I'm going to select the group, just pull it over. Here, it already has the occupancy load. So, and let's go down over here. Let's put this on view creator abbreviation. Oh, that's the other tool. So I can put that under other. There we go. And save it. So now I have all the parameters that I had from this project, and I put them in my master shared parameter file. So I'm now making sure that my shared parameter is always up to date with the latest. So that is the features of the shared parameter manager to make it so much easier and faster to create those parameters, modify that parameter file instead of doing it live within Revit. The next tool is when you're dealing with the shared parameter file and you're modifying it, and now we need to get that into your content. So we talked about how to get it into your project, but now how to get it into your content to then make sure those are up to date. That is family parameter, family processor, sorry, family processor. This tool is designed to make it so much easier to get your families updated with the new parameters. So let's go back into Revit. Now, in order for this tool to start, I do actually need to be in a family environment. And go to this CTC Software tab and then go to Family Processor. This tool has a bunch of settings here that we can control and update our families. So not just necessarily just parameters, but other things as well. There's family level processing. I have some settings in here to come through and set certain values. One of the biggest ones I like is on this tab is the open families with audit. I recommend auditing your projects and your content every so often, especially if you have upgrade your families from year to year to year. Opening those families with audit when you do so can be very beneficial. So this tool does help with the upgrading process. So this would be one thing that I would recommend to do during that upgrade process. Then under lookup tables, if you're doing with lookup tables, you can delete them or import lookup tables. You can change materials such as delete materials, add, and change them. But for this one, I want to cover the change parameters tab, where I'm going to browse to my master shared parameter file. It's then going to show me a list of all the parameters that are in it over these different tabs. First tab is delete. So if I come through and I say, okay, in this particular family, I see these parameters that I don't want, I can delete them. This is within the family that I'm in right now. So this is the parameters that are in the family in the background. If I don't want to have that, I can type the name. So if I know what it is, I can say, okay, if you find this parameter in my families, delete it. Or I can say select from family and browse to a particular family, select the parameters from that family and have it run through and delete those. Because if I'm not processing the family in the background, that's what you have to browse out to a family that contains what you're trying to do. The next tab is add shared parameters. This is where I can say, okay, come in and I want to add from my shared parameter file, add these parameters to my content. Is it going to be an instant or a type? Is it going to have a default value? I can't remember if yes, no parameters are going to be true. And then is there a formula? And then what is it going to be grouped under? So I'm going to put that one under identity data. So it just allows me to pick all the parameters that I want to force into there. Now these are adding brand new parameters to the content. We'll get to another tab here in a little bit. Then there's add family parameters. So this is the ones that are not schedulable. And then replace with shared parameters. So this one allows me to take a parameter and tell it to replace it with another parameter that's in my shared parameter, because we're talking about the GUIDs. If the GUID is different, but the name of the family or the name of the parameter is the same, but the GUID is different, that's going to be an issue because they're not the same, so they're not going to schedule correctly. This portion with replace with shared parameters will allow me to say, take this parameter and swap it to be this parameter. So I'm just going to grab one here. Let's say this door drywall frame. It's a yes, no parameter. So right here, when it says replace with shared parameter name, when I hit the drop down, it's only going to show me parameters that are a yes, no type. So that's a key here, is that it does have to match the parameter type in order to be in the drop down. It's a limitation in Revit that you cannot replace one parameter type with another completely different parameter type. So that's why there's that limitation here in the drop down. Now, one other ones down here at the very bottom is automatically replace all parameters found in the family with matching names and types found in the shared parameter. So this one is amazing if you have multiple shared parameters that have the same name, but the GUIDs are all different. The tool is going to run through there and say, hey, I found this parameter. I'm going to now replace it with this parameter from your shared parameter file. So now the GUID is going to be the same. And it's going to do it automatically without you having to manually go in there and map every single one of them. Now, if you don't want it to replace all of them, then I would uncheck it, and then you would want to do it manually up here. And then parameters to change, it allows you to pick parameters from your content and give it new information. So if you want to give it a new name or change it from an instant to a type or no change, what's the new value for it? And is there a formula? And I want to move the group. So take the parameters that I already have and change them up. Then under the next tab is processing order, which allows you to sort how you want these to be ordered from the tabs up here. So add shared parameters and add family parameters, replace with shared parameters and change. You reorder those. Depending on what you're trying to do, you may want these in a different order. Let's say I am replacing a shared parameter. Then I'm going to add a family parameter that references that parameter I'm changing, or I'm adding a family parameter that references I'm adding a shared parameter that references the family parameter that I'm about to add. So if I'm doing a formula for that shared parameter that references the family parameter, I need the family parameter to be done first before adding the shared parameter. The reason for that is because if you try to add a parameter with a formula first that references a parameter that doesn't exist, you're going to get an error that, hey, I can't find the parameter. So you get to change that order there. Then select families and begin. You choose your folder that has all your content in it. And then you get to pick from that content what groups and what families you want to process. So if you are processing all your content, you can pick every single one of your content that you're wanting to do and just say, run through every single one of these. So for now, I'm just going to go grab this folder with the casework in it. And here I get a list of the content in there. And let's say I want to grab a few from here and add it to the list below. So I'm going to say, run through these content here and process it based on what I told you in here. And then down at the bottom, you get to choose all the settings of, do you want to add edited behind it? Do you want to resave even if no change is needed? Which right here, useful for upgrading and compacting families. So that could be used for your upgrades. And then also save to an alternate parent folder. So if you are upgrading, you say go from 2021 to 2022. And then here, create new shared parameter files for all unique shared parameters found in the families. Then you can tell it where to export it. And so it's going to run through every single one of your families. And if it finds a unique parameter, it's going to export it out. So it's going to go through the first family, export those. Then the next family, and if it finds similar parameters, it will skip those, but then add any others. then you can use Shared Parameter Manager to then put those all in one single file into your master. And then after you pick all those, you simply say begin process, and it's going to run through and update your families with the content or the shared parameters that you've specified in the settings. And speaking of settings, you can save these settings so that you can use it again for future reference. You come in here, I could just say update to match shared parameter file. Now, if I close out of the tool and reopen, it does remember my last settings, but then I can come out here and say open, pick that one, hit open, and it will then remember all my settings. So when I was over here, this one's here, replace with shared is here. But I can also hit new settings and completely clear everything out. So now it's not doing anything. So a very, very, very powerful tool that you can use to get your content up to date with your project. Next tool to update is your schedule parameter resolver. And this tool is designed to take your schedules that are in your project and change the project parameters that are in use there to be your new shared parameters instead of the old ones. So again, you're gone through and you've updated your shared parameter file, you've updated your content. Now you need to go back to your schedules and make sure they're using the correct parameter now. So that is schedule parameter resolver. And so in here, I'm going to go to the schedule parameter resolver, and I get to pick what my master shared parameter is. I need to browse out to that one. I'm going to pick my schedule, and then in here, I get to choose what parameters I want to replace. So before I said hardware group, now I want to replace with the hardware group that I put with ATG in it. And then I'm going to say the fire rating in here, I'm going to say fire rating ATG. So this parameter was my old one. This parameter is the new one with the correct GUID. Completed. So if I go back to now my schedule, that parameter has now been replaced with the one that I chose. So if I come back over here, you can see there's the fire rating ATG, hardware group ATG. Now, if you actually notice, it actually kept the grouping. That's actually also by design. So I'm going to say undo here so that you can see the fire rating and hardware group there. And if I go back over to fields, you'll see that these two are not saying ATG. So that's actually built into the tool that you can actually keep the grouping. So under the options, there is the replace headers. So change only the headers matching the parameters in existing. Header grouping, extend groups to replace fields. So you get to choose, do you want to keep the original grouping? Do you want to change the name of it? You get to choose all that. So let's put that back here. So now I'm going to say this is the fire rating and this is the hardware group. So when I do that, again, it kept the grouping and replaced that. So that group here is still intact, and I didn't have to do the procedure of ungrouping and regrouping. The tool does it for you. So nice, quick, easy to be able to pick multiple schedules too. Not even just one at a time. You could pick multiple. Say anytime you find this in any of your schedules, go ahead and replace it with what you want it to. So all those tools that I just covered are in the BIM Manager suite. So these are all the the tools that the BIM manager or the power user will use to be able to update the parameters within the share parameter file, the content, and the schedules. Now, the last tool I want to cover is Parameter Jammer. And this tool could be used by the end users that, maybe not the BIM managers, they're just end users that this tool is designed to be kind of a one-off, not all the time in use, where I have downloaded content from a manufacturer or got it from someone else that they created it. But the problem is it doesn't have my shared parameters in it. So unfortunately, I can't have it work with my schedules because it's missing the parameters. So instead of spending a ton of time editing the family, adding the parameters that I want and load it back in, the Parameter Jammer tool is designed to make it even faster to do so. So what you do is, this is in the BIM project suite, by the way, is that I come in here and use Parameter Jammer. I pick my shared parameter file. And I'm going to browse out to my master one here. I'm going to pick my schedule, and then I'm going to pick my families that are missing the parameter I want to use. Hit next. The tool is going to run through and it's going to find any of the parameters that are missing from that family. So for example, every single one of those families is missing the fire rating and the hardware group in it. So just as a show that off here, switch tabs on me. If I go to my door schedule and I try to click in the fire rating for some of these, it might be blank. It won't let me update. There's a few of them that are working, but not every single one of them. So what I can do then is with Parameter Jammer is I can force it and say, in these particular families, I want you to add that parameter. So I'm going to come in here and say fire rating. I'm going to say that's a type parameter, hardware group. That's going to be an instant. This one's going to be a type, and this one's going to be an instant, and so on. Now I could select multiple of them and drop it down, or hit this here and pick it. But now I'm going to say next, and then the tool is going to run through and it's going to add those parameters to the family, load it back into the project, and now I will be able to select those fields and edit those in all those other parameter types. So if I had some of these, which I don't know which ones they were, but basically in here, I could come through and now select in every single one of these and pick a value. Whereas before, some of them worked, some of them didn't work, just depending on which ones had the parameters and which one didn't have the parameters. Now, one of the biggest things on this particular tool that I really need to cover, we've gotten support questions on this one and questions on how to go about using it, or, hey, I picked my schedule, picked my shared parameter, picked my content, but when I go to next, it's not showing parameters. For example, in this master file, I had a bunch of other parameters, but when I hit next, not every single one of them is listed. Well, the reason for that is that in order for the tool to work, you do have to have a family placed in the project that contains the parameter that you're trying to add to the other content. This is a requirement of the tool based on a Revit API limitation, that in order for the tool to match up the GUID, it needs to have an instant placed that has it. So basically, in your schedule, you cannot have no line item. You have to have at least one line item that has every single parameter that you're trying to put in there has to be in that family before you can add it to other families that don't have it. That's what the tool is designed to do, is you have all your content is working except for these few. I can then use Parameter Jammer to push the parameters into those that are not working. Not meant to be family processor, which is none of my families have this parameter. Now I need to push them in there. So family processor is the tool that's a global, all my families or a bunch of content need to be updated. Whereas parameter jammer is, hey, I have a bunch of content that's working, just a few that don't. But I'm not going to be working on those, using those content all the time. So I don't need to save it, just push it in there. That was the other thing with parameter jammer, is it does not save the family with those updated parameters, whereas family processor saves the families. So that is updating your shared parameter files with ease. If you have any questions, please open the question answer panel and send over your questions, please. I'm going to leave it open here for longer so we can get any of those questions you might have. One question was, do you have any recommendations on how to clean out project parameters from a project template or starter project? Good question. So one of the things that you can use in that regard is actually, I'm not sure, I can't remember if shared parameters are in the family process or the tool here for project cleaner. Let me remind myself here. Oh, it keeps sending behind. Yeah, so this one only does go through only the other ones in here. It doesn't go through shared parameters that are in there. That's actually been one question I've been asked several times before in the past as well. And currently there's not really any kind of tool right now that I'm aware of that can help go through and see if any of the project parameters are in use or not in use. You can use a kind of a combination of a few of these other tools. One of the big ones would be Spreadsheet Link, because Spreadsheet Link, the ability for that tool is just to see if any parameter has any values to it. I can come in here and let's say I'm grab doors, and then I'm going to grab like a parameter from that particular category of, hey, I want to get rid of certain parameters in here. So I can say, okay, hardware group or fire rating. And I can come through and say, okay, do any of these parameters have values? So I can kind of scan through here and I can see that none of those have values. So maybe then I can say that that parameter is not in use, get rid of it. But as far as just the kind of the quickness of it, unfortunately, there's not really a way to get rid of that. Another one I was thinking of was project processor, but I also don't think this one has any. Yes, actually it does. Right here, you can remove or share parameters. So there's let's see, I'm going to browse out to my master one here and add. Well, this is worth adding. So this was another one which I did forget to put in my webinar here, but a good question to bring it up is that project processor will allow you to pick parameters from your shared parameter file and add it to your projects as well. So I'm going to grab maybe, I can grab a parameter here. Oh, I have to have one category selected. Let's grab, oops, not cable tray. Let's grab rooms and spaces. And then you can come in here and specify a parameter and then value by default or value source. And then you'll run through multiple projects at once and add them to the project. But this is adding. I'm not seeing a way to remove parameters. So unfortunately, that's not a feature in any of the tools that I'm aware of. Actually, there is actually right here, add shared parameter, remove column, replace shared parameter. Actually, they're all right here. Remove source parameter, valid for project parameter only. So actually, you might have some in here that you can remove from multiple projects if you do happen to have that in there. But these are for project parameters. So shared parameter from projects. But again, not your content, so it's not going to go do anything from there. All right, any other questions here? Okay, well, thanks for your time here, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.